Michigan. They beat Illinois 19-17. Both games had a lot of similarities where the team that was favored off to a very slow start out of the gate, trailed for much of that game, and had to come from behind late on a final drive from Michigan. They converted multiple fourth downs. I was listening to the Michigan radio call driving back from golf that morning, and you could hear the tightness in their voice. You could hear the oh my goodness, the season kind of ends if we lose this. And Trey, I kept thinking back to what you were saying in the preview that this game didn't matter. Obviously, you didn't mean that, hey, they can afford to lose this game necessarily, but uh, that's almost what it felt like going into that fourth quarter, that last few drives. It was like, oh, maybe Michigan really did come into this game like, oh, yeah, it doesn't really matter. Our one game season truly is just next week. But as we've seen with USC, as we were seeing with North Carolina before they lost yesterday, I guess we'll touch on that in a little bit. One loss teams, you're not necessarily automatically in with a two-loss LSU team that's putting together one of the best resumes in college football. I think it's lucky that Michigan pulled that iron out of the fire. I'll let you guys take it whichever direction you'd like to, whether it's Michigan, Illinois, Baylor, TCU. I know we've got thoughts on both of them.
I'll start with Michigan because I think that scenario played out exactly like I was expecting it to, and I can't get to say that a lot. So I'm going to start with Michigan. But personally, I do think that that game ultimately would it put a sour taste in their mouth going into OSU and probably hurt their chances to beat Ohio State. Yeah, if they would have lost to Illinois, I don't think that they're going to be very confident heading into their game against the Buckeyes. But I think a one-loss Big Ten champion gets in, whether that loss is to Ohio State or whether it's to Illinois or whether it's to Michigan State, like it was last year for the Wolverines. So it was a close but definitely not fun game. Just a really ugly Big Ten style game of football where a lot of the action is 3 yards in a cloud of dust. Michigan really, I think, kind of lulled themselves to sleep in the first half, even though they only had a 7-3 lead. They scored really early and then just kind of put it in cruise control until the fourth quarter when they really finally turned it on. But Blake Corum going down definitely didn't help. I know that probably took a big deflating blow to that sideline as we usually see um, happening with these things. But yeah, I think they lost themselves some margin for error if there is that true chaos scenario where LSU jumps in or USC loses and Clemson loses and there's that real chaos scenario where we're looking for a fourth team. I think Michigan did lose a little bit of margin for error. But as we've been saying all year, if you stay undefeated, if you run the table, it's kind of no harm, no foul until it isn't. So probably lost a little margin of error, but I think they'll be okay.
Yeah, and just to talk about this game was entirely Michigan style of football, but the problem is they went off script by Blake Corum getting hurt. Right, Corum had a whole bunch of yards before he went down. They were just a little bit ahead going towards the half, and then the injury goes down. He tried it a little bit in the third quarter. He came out for the first drive. I think he might have even carried the ball for like 6 yards or something like that, and then just said, "Nope, can't do it." And so I think he'll be healthy now. Will he be 100%? We got to wait and see. For Michigan's sake, I hope that he's 100% so we can actually get a really good game next week and that we don't have to wonder maybe what could have been if we had a healthy Blake Corum. So we'll have to wait and see on that one. I do think, and I want to go ahead and give Harbaugh a lot of credit here. Trey, you kind of mentioned it. I think he knew that losing this game was less important than losing Blake Corum. And I
Yep.
think that he realized that that was the move he had to make. I think he said, yeah, Blake Corum could play. I mean, he clearly could play. He was able to go back out there. He was able to walk on his, hurt foot. He was able to play. I think he realized that it doesn't matter because if I beat Ohio State and I win the Big Ten, one loss isn't going to keep me out with that good of a resume. And so I think he realized that and just decided we're going to pull the plug on it. We're going to try to get through this because I need my best player next week. And I think that Harbaugh made the right call. It was a gutsy call, but I think he made the right call. So great job to him just sort of in terms of managing his roster and getting that thing right. You have to give Michigan's defense a lot of credit. Down the stretch, I think Michigan had to pull three different field goal drives to end up taking the lead in this game after they went down 17-10. And that Michigan defense stood tall, did what they had to do, and gave the offense a chance each time. if Michigan's missing guys next week, that's going to be a really rough way to end what's been a really cool season so far. I'm hoping that they can get their guys back. They were missing, I think, their backup running back as well, and I think they were missing a receiver. I can't remember exactly who was out, but they were missing a bunch of guys. So they need to get healthy fast. Fortunately for them, Ohio State kind of slipped up too. So we're gonna kind of get both teams not necessarily feeling as good as they should be feeling going into this game. So we'll see what happens. I'm really excited for this next week. But yeah, Michigan's got to get healthy quick.
Before we move on to TCU, where are we at on JJ McCarthy? Because I think that
Oh boy.
was my biggest concern coming out of this game for Michigan is that he had to shoulder the burden. And while, you're right, he led 3 field goal drives. He led them down the field 3 times to get into field goal range. He didn't necessarily inspire a ton of confidence to my eyes. So where are you guys at on JJ McCarthy?
What I'll say on McCarthy is this. So he's been inconsistent this year. That's been a big reason why they haven't necessarily put up some of the massive offensive numbers you've seen out of some of these other top teams, is just because they're not able to finish drives. A lot of times they'll end up settling for field goals towards the end of their drives. And obviously they do lean on the run game, and that helps when you have one of the best running backs in the country. Um, that being said, he's going to have to be better down the stretch if they have championship ambitions, even conference championship ambitions. If they want to win that, I think he's got to be a lot better. He's flashed, but at the same time, I think he's still struggling from the fact that, and this is maybe controversial too. I don't think Michigan has those guys outside that can really get the separation to help him out. They have really good wide receivers, but it seems like they're all just kind of possession guys, and none of them really scare me, right? None of them really scare me as like, oh, that guy's a deep threat. He'll get loose. He'll get behind a defense. He'll really make a play. None of those guys really scare me. They're all really good receivers. It's not to take anything away from them, but I just think a combination of sort of youth plus not having the elite guys plus having some of your best players out, I think that kind of changed up the script for him. Now, what I like about it is if you're not going to have Blake Corum, you probably know that right now, and he's able to practice knowing he has to be the guy all week. And so that probably helps him out a little bit, kind of change up the game script. But yeah, I think he's got to be a lot better. And it's a really interesting decision for Harbaugh on how to manage this situation.
Michigan is built so much differently. They're almost the exact counter to Ohio State, right? Ohio State has the fast, flashy receivers who can go down deep. They can make the circus style catches. Michigan does not have that, and they haven't had that in a long time. Their receiving core is never flashy. It's never sexy. It's always big, tall, possession wide receivers, like Garrett said, that ultimately you can throw the deep ball against lesser competition. It's possession style ball consistently moving the chains against the better competition. And I think that's been part of what's held Michigan back on the biggest stage is they don't have that deep threat that can break the game, that can stretch the field. So, yeah, losing Blake Corum would be an absolute setback, no doubt about it. You're right. Maybe JJ McCarthy gets an extra week of changing the game plan. I don't believe in him as a downfield passer just because I don't think you can just turn that on. I think he is what he is. He's a very good quarterback. He's a very good game manager and excellent at doing what Michigan is asking him to do.
Takes
Plus,
care of the football really well too.
he
Doesn't
does.
turn it over.
He takes care of the football. He's got some mobility with his legs. But I do think if Blake Corum, which is plan A, B, and C for Michigan, if he's out or limited against Ohio State, we talked about this, Trey, I guess a couple of episodes ago when it was just me and you. I picked Michigan back then, saying if you took both of these teams, all else being equal, give me the team that can run the ball consistently and take air out of it. Now, if you're telling me that's not a given, maybe the pendulum's swinging back to Ohio State for me.
Yeah, and both these teams are built to beat each other. Like you look at a situation yesterday where if Michigan felt like they had a more formidable foe on the field, I know Illinois has had a solid season, but if Michigan felt that they were in severe danger of their season going down the drain, like you said, Garrett, Blake Corum's probably playing in that game. So yeah, they're built to beat each other. It's gonna be fascinating to see which style wins out, and I hope we get to see a fully operational Michigan.
What I will say, regardless of how Michigan play, and we can obviously say more of this, but regardless of how well they can play on offense, after what I've seen out of Ohio State this year, I think Michigan's defense has a real chance to shut them down and hold them to a really low scoring total. Again, and I think McCarthy's game style plays towards that. A couple season stats for you. He's completed 66% of his passes, hasn't gotten to the 2,000-yard mark yet, but he's got 14 touchdowns to 2 interceptions and a 150 rating. That's pretty good. He's playing pretty well. He's efficient with the ball, like you guys are saying, game manager type guy. He's not going to make mistakes, and that's going to help when you have, if you're missing a Blake Corum, if you're missing, some of these players that they're counting on. If your defense is going to be able to stand up and play with Ohio State, not making mistakes, especially on the road, is going to be huge for you.
Gracious him! How about